What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. I'm joined by your favorite beat reporter, Chris Fedor. What up, Chris?
Ethan, how's it going, man?
Doing well. How are you hanging in there on this West Coast trip so far?
As good as I can be. It's very weird trying to get adjusted to the time and when I'm eating at night and what time it would be back in Cleveland if I was eating at that point. But somebody told me a long time ago, Ethan, that when you're on the West Coast, you have to live your life on the West Coast time. But that's difficult, right? Because I'm having conversations with my wife who's back in Cleveland. The time on my computer is set to Eastern Standard Time, and I don't have administrative purposes to change that. So I'm trying my best to stay on West Coast time, or in this case, Mountain Time, before going to the West Coast. And it's kind of messing with my brain a little bit.
For sure. You gotta get used to that jet lag and that 3 hours stuff. Like, it is a different breed. So that's why we gotta get you out of the country more, like we talked about last time. And that'll maybe help you out. Because them 13-hour days, I'm telling you, that difference, it'll be hitting. But, Chris, I want to talk about tonight's game where the Cavs were able to run away with a 129-113 win over the Utah Jazz. And unfortunately, this was supposed to be like a game against former teammates, and yet a lot of those guys were injured today. Colin Sexton was the only player outside of Donovan Mitchell, Lauri Markkanen, John Collins, those guys who had either played for the Cavs or the Utah Jazz at one point, now we're all injured. And was there a vibe that there was gonna be like some kind of more competitiveness that might have gotten taken away because those guys weren't playing?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the Cavs had a number of things that they were dealing with themselves. Obviously, Donovan said after the game on Sunday when they lost by double digits to the Nuggets, we've got to figure it out. We've got to play better. It's April. It's bleeping April. So, the Cavs were more concerned on their end about getting off to a good start, not playing down to their competition, not allowing a young, hungry team to outwork them and outcompete them. And to the Cavs' credit, and I know it was Utah, and when you beat Utah by double digits, it doesn't mean that all of your problems are fixed. It doesn't mean that what happened in March no longer matters. It just means that you did what you did on this Tuesday night, and you did what you had to do on this Tuesday night. And it was a feel-good win for the Cavs. They played exceptional basketball, especially on the offensive end. They shared the ball, got a bunch of contributions up and down the lineup, and it was the kind of win that obviously makes them feel better than the way that they felt on Sunday following the loss against the Denver Nuggets.
There are 4 players that I want to hit on today for their performances and why they kind of stood out to me. First off, I got to put these two together. Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen obviously were dominant on the interior tonight, and they needed to be with Lauri Markkanen out of the game. And that was the game plan, it seemed, from the get-go. They were getting the ball inside and allowing Jarrett Allen or Evan Mobley to be an offensive hub. And Chris, we've talked about that on numerous occasions this season of how important that growth in their game can be for this team, not only in the postseason this year, but also in the future, because having them play not obviously up to the style or the success rate of Nikola Jokic, but having that option to be able to give them the ball, let them create, let them decide whether they want to take their man off the dribble, let their man fade back, and then they go for a little mid-range pull-up. That's Jarrett Allen more so. Or the option that they have shooters around them to create for them as well. I mean, Jarrett Allen finished with 5 assists, and Evan Mobley also finished with 5 assists. And I guess these guys wanted to kind of match each other. They had 21 points apiece as well. And it was just a good showing from them on the interior. And what the team has been lacking recently, it seemed, because on the glass, they were also able to get the job done as well. Jarrett Allen had 12 rebounds, and Evan Mobley had 7 rebounds. Obviously, we would want more from Evan on that end, but with him doing a lot of the shooting and getting his man and being away from the basket and also potentially having to block and then other people getting the rebounds after that, I don't want to dock him too much for the lack of rebounds tonight. But obviously, like I said in yesterday's podcast, we don't want to have recency bias. We want to just continue to report on what's going on and how it can impact them next. Chris, do you want to add anything about Evan Mobley or Jarrett Allen about the game that you saw from them?
I think it was the biggest storyline of tonight's game, Ethan. I think it's the only thing, honestly, that matters coming out of this game when we talk about the Cavs moving forward, because there's not too much that you can learn about a Cavs team when they're playing against the Utah Jazz, who are collecting ping pong balls for the lottery right now, who have lost 10 straight games, didn't have John Collins, didn't have Jordan Clarkson, didn't have Johnny Juzang, who has been playing for them lately, didn't have Lauri Markkanen, as you mentioned. So this is a depleted Jazz team that stunk to begin with. So there's very little, I think, that we can learn about the 3 seed in the Eastern Conference when they're playing against this kind of competition. But to me, the Jarrett Evan piece of tonight's game was important, and it matters moving forward from this standpoint. Whether it was Utah tonight, Denver the other night, whoever they're going to play moving forward, teams are approaching the Cavs the same kind of way. And whoever they play in the first round of the playoffs is going to use the same defensive tactic based on the personnel that the Cavs have, based on how dangerous Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland can both be in terms of breaking down a defense and creating for teammates or creating for themselves, for that matter. Teams are going to send multiple bodies at one of those guys, whoever they deem is the biggest offensive threat. And they're going to try and make everybody else on the Cavs become the playmakers, the initiators, and in some cases, the finishers as well, Ethan. So because of that, that's how the Utah Jazz approached tonight's game. They tried to get the ball out of the hands of Darius. It allowed the Cavs to play 4-on-3. It allowed Jarrett or Evan to play out of the pocket, make decisions, create for others, score for themselves, take what the defense gives them. And Evan Mobley talked about it following the game. There's more responsibility now on him and Jarrett Allen because of the way that defenses are loading up to take the ball out of the hands of Darius, Donovan, and in some cases, Caris LeVert too. So it's going to be up to these other guys to make the right play. It's going to be up to these other guys to make shots when those are presented to them. And to see Jarrett and Evan make quality decisions with the ball in their hands, and to see Jarrett and Evan take advantage of those 4-on-3 situations, that's really, really important. Because if we go back to last year's playoff series against the Knicks, the Cavs went in that series. They expected the Knicks to blitz. The Knicks did blitz. And then when Evan Mobley was playing 4-on-3 in the early stages of that series, it felt like the game was moving a little bit too fast for him. It felt like he was a step behind in some cases, and his decision-making wasn't always what it needed to be for the Cavs offense to have success. So they need to learn as this season continues to progress and as we get closer to the playoffs, the Cavs as a team need to learn how to be effective offensively when Darius and Donovan are taken out of possessions or taken out of quarters, or taken out of halves, or however long it's going to take for those guys to try and get integrated on offense based on what the opposing defense is doing to them. And to see both Jarrett and Evan flourish in that kind of situation on the same night, at the same time, that matters moving forward, because that's what the Cavs are going to have to do to combat the strategy of anybody but Donovan or Darius.
Yeah, Chris, and I think the person that has stepped up a lot in that absence of either Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell this season has been Caris LeVert, especially with the guard minutes and what he's been able to contribute on that end of the ball, not only scoring but also facilitating. And it's been helpful for the Cavs because especially with Donovan Mitchell, who is not known as a primary point guard or a primary facilitator, like he can get his own buckets and we know that he can pass, but the ability for Caris LeVert to step in, especially when Darius Garland was out, and to increase his assist numbers and be able to contribute in that way was huge for the Cavs and something that they'll look for with whatever capacity Donovan Mitchell is going to be able to compete in the playoffs. I've written about this for cleveland.com. Caris LeVert has been a good focal point for this team when Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland has been out. He's been able to step up, and especially in tonight's game, we got to see him stand out as a starter. That's something we haven't seen a lot of this season, as he's been kept in a six-man role and something that he's enjoyed. Caris LeVert has grown a whole lot this season and been able to showcase multiple facets of his game, whether it was passing, the scoring, and tonight he did almost all of it. He had 26 points and 5 assists while also grabbing 6 rebounds, and he was able to contribute on the defensive end with a steal and a block. I mean, Caris LeVert has been somebody that I think has stepped up almost on every occasion since he's gotten the opportunities when either Darius or Donovan are out, especially in those setups, because obviously with Darius and Donovan in, there's less minutes for Caris even in the six-man role. Chris, the last person I want to talk about before we get out of here, because this is going to be a short one today, is Sam Merrill, dude. Like, I know this is your former favorite team or your favorite team growing up, but this man just likes putting the knife in them and turning it. Like, the last time they played the Jazz, Sam Merrill had a career high in points, and then tonight he came out and put on a show as well, had 6 3-pointers, going for 18 points, and also was able to do his thing, passing the ball, getting 5 assists. And I mean, he had a plus-minus of plus 15. That's tied for the third best on the team after tonight's game behind Jarrett Allen, Caris LeVert, and tied with Max Strus. Sam Merrill has been somebody that we've watched all year progress, and we've seen him go through slumps, which everybody does in the NBA. But the one thing that I've seen with Sam is that he has never lacked confidence. And there's something that is important with that, especially going into, like we said, everything is aiming toward this first round of the playoffs. And what everybody on the Cavs are going to be able to contribute. And Sam, somebody who has been consistent this year, somebody who the Cavs have been able to turn to in dark moments, somebody that the Cavs have leaned on to make tough shots. I think he has earned the right to not only be a rotational piece in the playoffs, but depending on how Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, and Caris LeVert are playing, have an opportunity to have maybe more minutes than expected. What do you think about that, Chris?
It feels like to me, Ethan, that Sam Merrill is pretty matchup dependent because he does have limitations and he does have flaws, and they can be exposed by better teams, faster teams, more athletic teams, longer teams, especially on the perimeter. So I think when you're talking about a role player like Sam, when you're talking about a specialist like Sam, he has a weapon that the Cavs definitely need. His shooting, his gravity, his floor spacing, his constant movement, all of that is beneficial to the Cavs in the right matchup. And I think his success is largely predicated on the matchup. Tonight he was great. The previous game against the Jazz, he was great. There are other nights where I do think his flaws get more exposed. In saying that, depending on who the Cavs play in the first round of the playoffs and depending on how the matchups shake out, he can definitely be a weapon for this team. And the thing that I like so much about Sam is that, Ethan, he knows who he is. He knows what his role is. He doesn't try and go outside that role, right? He took 13 shots tonight against the Jazz. 12 were from three-point range. That's where he lives. That's what he does. He doesn't hesitate when he gets the ball. He's always looking to shoot because that's why he's on this team. That's why he's going to get minutes. And if he starts passing up shots or if he starts dribbling the ball to create more space, then he starts to get outside of himself. And he rarely does that. And that's one thing that is beneficial to the Cavs. And that's something that they absolutely need from somebody like Sam. But I also think we have to put it in perspective. The last couple of nights with him getting more and more playing time, it also coincided with Isaac Okoro being out of the lineup. And we've talked about this so many times throughout the course of the season. The Cavs know how important Sam can be on offense. They know the kind of weapon that he can be. They know the kind of gravity that he can create. But finding consistent minutes for him, especially in a 7-game series where a rotation is going to shorten from 9-10 to probably 8 or even 7, it's not going to be that easy. And it's a lot easier when Donovan Mitchell's not playing and Isaac Okoro's not playing to get Sam Merrill shot attempts and to get him consistent minutes. But the Cavs are hoping that that's not always going to be the case when it comes to playing without Isaac, playing without Donovan. And when they're at full strength or close to it, Sam moves further and further down the depth chart, and he moves further and further down the hierarchy.
Yeah, Kristen, one of the things that we've talked about for Sam, and somewhere that he's had limitations this season that have been apparent, especially against physical and tougher teams, is on defense. And the one thing that I have seen as of late when he has gotten the opportunities is he surprised me with how much he has been able to keep his man in front of him, continue to push back and things of that nature. Like, I talked to Sam's old coaches this past week from when he was at Utah State, and one of them said that he literally would guard the best player on the opposing team on almost any given night when he was at Utah State. And that's not surprising to me as much now, knowing how much he works and how much he studies the game of basketball to understand the film and where players are going to be before they go. And obviously that's a little different in the NBA now because of how things progress and how teams are able to change their moves, and these different players have counter moves and things of that nature. But his defensive prowess is something that even Marcus Morris Sr., who hasn't even been with the team for over a month yet, has noticed within like the first couple games playing with him. It's something that a lot of people have not only taken for granted, but because there are definitely matchups that make him look worse than he actually is, people don't understand what he's able to bring on that end of the floor. And I think that's a big portion of it. And one other thing on Sam before I let you go again is I realized how much he had to adapt his game from college to the NBA because of how big of a star or how big of a player he was at Utah State. The man played 170 minutes straight over a 4-game span, Chris. That is insane. And to think that Sam has now moved to a rotation spot and has not been like, oh, I need to prove myself. Oh, I need to do everything that I was able to do in college. Oh, I need to play out of my body so that you can think that I'm good enough to play more minutes, is telling of not only his character, but his discipline and his willing to take on a role that he knows can impact this team at a bigger scale than anything else that he could bring to the team, and that is his shooting.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the playoffs, Ethan, he's going to have to be a change of pace type player. I think he's going to have to be an in-case type player, because we've talked about this so many times, and we have to live in the reality of this team. Many of their key contributors, many of their starters, are going to play big minutes in a 7-game series. Donovan's probably going to be around like 44. Darius Garland is going to be close to 40, if not in the 40s. Max Strus is going to get big minutes because he's really important to the success of this team. So anytime you talk about giving somebody more minutes, you have to take them from somebody else. They come at the expense of somebody else. When you're talking about Sam specifically, right? They're either going to come at the expense of Karis LeVert, Isaac Okoro, Darius Garland, because you can shift Donovan to the 1 and put somebody else at the 2. They're going to come at the expense of Donovan. And it's like, whose minutes do you want to take from in order to give Sam the kind that he deserves and he has earned? Sometimes it's a numbers game, especially in the playoffs, when rotations shorten in a significant way. And we know, going based on what we saw last year against the Knicks in that particular series, JB cut his rotation in a significant way. And that's just the kind of coach that he is. And many other coaches in the playoffs do the same thing. They don't play as many guys as they do in the regular season. Guys who get minutes in the regular season become DNPs or become in case we need them types. So I just think we have to live within the reality of this team and understand that the two positions where Max plays, those are some of the deeper spots that the Cavs have. And it's going to be very difficult to find consistent minutes when all these other guys, theoretically, you would also want to play big minutes.
Yeah, Chris, and I think we've talked about this a good amount, and obviously it depends on matchup and who the Cavs are playing.
And it doesn't mean that he can't have an impact, right? And it doesn't mean that he's not an important player. And it doesn't mean that he hasn't had a great season and shown how he can be effective. It's just a math equation.
Yeah, and I think if Darius Garland does not show up as he has in the last couple of games, or how the Cavs know he needs to in the playoffs, I think JB Bickerstaff, and we said this yesterday, would be willing to go in a different direction based on matchups and based on who they're playing and what their styles are. Obviously, this does not mean that the starting lineup is going to change. It's just a game-by-game basis. And we know how crazy the NBA can be. And I want to look at some of the games from around the league tonight, Chris, just to give an example. The Wizards, let me say this again. The Wizards beat the Bucks 117-114. Joel Embiid returned. And the 76ers beat the Oklahoma City Thunder when the Oklahoma City Thunder are currently at the top of the Western Conference. They're currently a half game behind Denver, and because of tiebreaker stuff, they're behind the Minnesota Timberwolves in third in the Western Conference.
OKC did not have Shea or Jalen Williams. Got to point that out.
Correct. And they didn't have two of their bigger scorers, but just Joel Embiid's impact changes things as well. And the Spurs, the San Antonio Spurs, put up a fight with the Denver Nuggets, taking it down to the wire, 110-105. The Nuggets were able to pull it out. And then the last game that felt interesting to me was the Warriors and the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks fell to the Warriors 104-100. And we talk about how the NBA is unpredictable. Anything can happen on any night. It depends on who's playing, who's not, what things are being changed during games, what matchups everybody has. All of those things play a factor into how the NBA is going to shake out in the final season. So let's look at what the Eastern Conference looks like now. And I feel like I don't even have to say Boston anymore because we know they're at the top. They've clinched the division. They're going to the playoffs. Next, you have Milwaukee, who has 47 wins and 28 losses, and the Cavs are currently a game and a half behind them in the third seed with 46 wins and 30 losses. They are followed by the Orlando Magic, who have 44 wins and 31 losses, and they're a game and a half behind. But the New York Knicks are also a game and a half behind with 44 wins and 31 losses. This is where it gets a little scary, Chris, because we understand that the Knicks are the worst matchup in the Eastern Conference for a first-round playoff matchup for the Cavs. And if something happens, we keep saying, things happen, and the Cavs fall down to the 4 seed and the Knicks don't rise up the rankings, the Cavs just flip with Orlando, that potential matchup could happen. It's, I want to say unlikely, but it is a possibility. And then the Indiana Pacers are in the 6th seed with 43 wins and 33 losses. They're 3 games behind the Cavs. And Miami is right behind the Pacers with 42 wins and 33 losses. And they are only half a game back from that 6th seed, which is avoiding the play-in tournament. And the 76ers are right there too. 41 wins, 35 losses, and only 2 games behind the Pacers in that 6th seed. So, Chris, this is getting insane. And I'm not even covering the other teams, but knowing how those could impact the Cavs, it's got me sweating.
Well, look, I mean, that's part of the reason why, for the Cavs, we talked about the importance of this game against Utah. This is a tough stretch that the Cavs are currently on. This is a tough road trip that they're dealing with. They've got Phoenix and both LA teams still to come, and they started this trip in Denver against the Nuggets. You don't want to sit there and play the schedule game of win-loss, 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 but you understand that some of these matchups are obviously going to be easier for the Cavs than others. The game tonight against Utah was a figurative layup. For a team the caliber of the Cavs, even without Donovan Mitchell, even without Isaac Okoro, even without Dean Wade, Craig Porter Jr., it was a figurative layup for them. And they made the layup tonight, right? So that banks a win for them that allows them to potentially, if they lose against Phoenix, if they lose against the Lakers or the Clippers, because they banked the win against Utah, because they beat Philly without Embiid a couple nights ago, that gives them a little bit of a buffer zone. That gives them some breathing room. But there are other layups on the schedule coming down the stretch as well. Memphis and Charlotte. So the bankable games for the Cavs are the ones that they need to get. And then maybe possibly they can find a way to steal one that it seems like maybe they shouldn't get. The Clippers on this particular portion of the schedule might be the most winnable game given the states of these teams that the Cavs are going up against. But like, that's the second night of a back-to-back. And playing tomorrow against Phoenix after traveling from the altitude here in Utah, that's playing the second night of a back-to-back. So this is a tough stretch of the schedule, and it's up to the Cavs to take advantage and win the games that they should win, and they did that tonight against Utah. And that gives them some breathing room. That means that New York is no longer as close to them in terms of overtaking 3. It means the Magic aren't as close to the Cavs in terms of overtaking 3. And the Cavs now don't have to go on this incredible winning streak to finish out the season just to hold on to the number 3 spot. Cavs, by the way, after tonight, Ethan, 29-9 when leading after the first quarter. If we want to talk about a potential formula for them, it's get off to a good start, allow the defense to take over, and set the tone early. And the Cavs definitely did that against Utah with their effort, with their energy, with their defense. Most importantly, with Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley dominating the paint. So that's something to watch for tomorrow night against Phoenix, is the start that the Cavs get off to. Because even J.B. Bickerstaff said after the game tonight, Ethan, that you can tell a lot about how we play and how the game is going to go for us based on how we play in the first quarter.
Yeah, Chris. And this team, when they get off, they're a scary bunch. But if they don't, they can sometimes falter. So we'll have to see which team they get going into the game against the Phoenix Suns tomorrow. You got an early flight, don't you?
Of course I do. I have to get to Phoenix.
So I guess it's time to wrap up the podcast. All right. That'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But until next time, become a Cavs insider and interact with me and Chris by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from Chris and me. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.